So a lot of customers, a lot of OEMs are working on what we call conventional waste heat recovery systems, which is an organic Rankine cycle system, where they have a fluid circulating in and around the exhaust. There's a heat exchanger that extracts the heat of the exhaust into this fluid, take it up to a temperature where it boils. You create a vapor, high pressure vapor. We then expand that across a supercharger, basically running in reverse as an expander. You take the heat out, that energy is driven right into the belt and added to the output of the engine. Demonstrated on a vehicle about a 5% fuel economy improvement, which for a passenger car isn't great. You may not be able to afford the system to do that, but if you put it on a line haul truck or a commercial vehicle, 5% they would kill for that kind of fuel economy improvement, because it's their biggest single cost of running a commercial fleet is fuel. So it's much more affordable on there, which is where we're targeting. Then an idea came up really at Mississippi State for coming up with a less expensive way to do it. So we're working with Shell Oil, Mississippi State, and the DOE to look at, can you augment the properties of the engine coolant so that it still goes through the engine, absorbs the heat out of the engine, and get it to a point where it's just hot enough that all you gotta do is add a little bit more of exhaust heat energy to it. You can boil it, you can expand it, let it go right back through the existing radiator. You're not adding any more radiators, any more fluid systems on board. It becomes a much more affordable way of capturing waste heat recovery, to the point where it may even be feasible on a passenger car for doing it. We're seeing maybe 3 or 4% here, but still, if you can do it with simply adding an expansion device and changing the fluid, it becomes much more affordable. So something else we're working on next door with the DOE. Last time, then we'll get into some other topics. Micro hybrids in passenger cars. We're already doing stop-start, where you eliminate an alternator and a starter and replace it with a generator, a motor generator basically. That's worth significant fuel economy. We're taking it a step further and saying, okay, if we can integrate with a stop-start motor generator, a supercharger system, put it on a planetary gearbox where we can drive any of those at a speed very independent of the engine speed, so we can keep them in their most efficient operating range and provide boost that is independent of engine RPM. You can almost get an internal combustion engine to have a torque curve much like an electric motor, where at idle conditions you can get amazing amount of torque if you can boost the engine independent of its RPM, and then carry that straight across. It allows you to reduce the size of the internal combustion engine by about at least 20% and get the same amount of performance out of it, and an equivalent fuel economy improvement of about 23%. We have that vehicle running next door. A lot of interest. The biggest challenge there is trying to get it all packaged. Passenger cars have very tight packaging spaces. And then we're working on, like a turbocharger, but using a supercharger type device that can directly take the heat out of the exhaust like a turbo does, and be able to use that to drive motor generators. Between the two of them, we can keep a fairly small battery heavily charged to augment engine power with a supercharger. Pretty neat stuff. It's incredible what you can get out of it. You can now take maybe a 3-liter engine and run it with a 1.8-liter engine and get pretty much the same performance with tremendous improvement in fuel economy. All right, switching gears a little bit. So what's it like working as an engineer in small private companies? I've had a little bit of experience there. Most of these are my opinions. These are not Ethan's opinions, but how they're similar is really only in one way. As an engineer, you only have 2 people you got to satisfy: your customers, the people who own the company. And it's a balance, because they really in contradiction to each other. They'll tell you not. Everybody wants to please the customer, right? But the owners are going to do it at a profitable point. And if things get tight, they'll cut budgets, they'll reduce expenses to maintain profitability and stay in business. Sometimes that's against what the customers want and what you may have promised the customer. So you have to recognize, you got to learn to balance. You got to learn to understand how businesses run, why they're successful, and why they make the decisions they do, because they directly affect you. The more you understand it, the more you can accept it and continue to move on. But if it's a private company or a large public company, understanding that is very, very different. You need to understand how they work and why they tick. Advantages of working for a large company, you have a lot of resources at your hand. There's a lot of money available, especially if you got a company that wants to invest in research and development. But you also have a lot of engineers, coworkers, who you can go to for help, for asking questions about power electronics. I don't know anything about power electronics, but there's probably 10,000 engineers in Eaton that know an awful lot about it. I know how to get to them. We call it internal crowdsourcing. You've heard of crowdsourcing itself, open crowdsourcing, where someone has an idea and they have a technical challenge. They just post it on the web, and you can get thousands of people worldwide willing to try and help you out, which is great, but then there's no intellectual property. The government considers that public domain information available to anybody, so you can't patent it. So you better be the best at low-cost producing it. So we've taken that one step and we've internalized it. Since we're such a large company, we have access to 30,000 engineers. So we internally crowdsource some of our ideas. So at lunchtime, crazy geeky engineers, right? They go on, they look, and there's 100 questions out there about technology. Does anybody know anything about this? Anybody know anything about that? And we crowdsource internally, and that's a lot of fun. But it's incredible the amount of ideas you get and the varying ideas that you can use to develop whatever you're doing. A large company, it usually has a solid business foundation. So if the project you're working on doesn't pan out after 2 years of work, the company's not going under. You just move on to the next project. In a smaller company, they may only have 2 or 3 that the whole future of the company is riding on. If it fails, the whole business could go under. So you're in a little more risky position. We talked about failure doesn't mean your job, but there's a consistent salary, there's good benefits. Does it have the potential to grow if you get in with a startup? No, but it is consistent. Where small companies, they work hard. They struggle to give you competitive salary and benefits. The upside's good if the company really takes off, but there is that risk. You kind of have to live with that. So what are the cons? Big companies that are publicly held, they have to answer to the shareholders, and shareholders are a finicky group. They invest almost on a day-to-day basis now. They are looking for the company that gives them a return that's consistent and is growing. So they get a dividend with their investment. They know the profitability of the company's sound, so that their value of their stock is going up at the same time. The minute that takes the slightest downturn, people start dumping your stock, and that takes down the value of the company. So the people who run the company, the board of directors and the senior leadership, they only have one role, and that's to make their stockholders happy. So what they will do is they will make decisions that maintain what the shareholder expectations are. So your budget could be, $1 million one month, and the next month it's only $500,000. It just depends on how the stock market's going. So you get swings in your ability to spend. Whereas a private company, if it's a small owner, he may say, I'm willing to forego 2 years of my own personal income, my own salary, if we have this tremendous idea. So he's willing to fund it through the dark times or the down times, because he only has to answer to himself. So it's very, very different. Decision making is terribly slow in large companies. A decision that would take 3 weeks today in a large meeting, I used to be able to walk down the hall, knock on the owner's door, have a 2-minute conversation, and be on my way. But you have to live with it. You got to fill out 58 forms, and 3 people have to sign it and agree to it. And they have a schedule, so they don't get to it for weeks and weeks. You have to accept it. You have to learn to live with it. Lots and lots of reporting and processes. 50% of my job is writing monthly reports, giving someone an update on Project Y, and just doing all of that nauseating paperwork when the people who are working for me are having fun, right? But you got to do that. You got to report up, because the shareholders want to see what's going on too. And if you are successful with an R&D project, there's no guarantee you actually follow that project into production. Usually they yank it right out from underneath you, they give it to a launch team, and off they go, and you're back doing other things. If you enjoy doing that, it's a great environment. But if you're the type of person, the entrepreneurial type that really wants to take something start to finish, large companies, you really don't have that opportunity. things to consider about when you're looking for jobs. Definitely pros and cons. So what is Eaton looking for? We're still looking for that entrepreneurial type. We want people who think inclusively. In other words, they really want to take in all the input they can, judge for themselves what's the best idea, make sure they've gotten all of the ideas they can possibly get, and treat their project as if it were their own money. Think about if you were a small business and this was your own little private entity, what would you do? How would you react? It helps you navigate the system, especially when people start asking you questions. They'll ask an engineer, well, what about the business case? What is the business case? Why do we think the customer would buy this? So you gotta think like an entrepreneur, and we're looking for that. So what does that really mean? To be inclusive and to be able to use an inclusive mentality, you have to have a very diverse work group that you work with. We are really pushing to make sure, at least in my group, I've got maybe 50 engineers globally. I want to have the broadest diversity of candidates I can possibly get. So when I have engineering openings, I look and see if I've got 10 mechanical engineers, I'm not looking for a mechanical engineer. I'm going to make sure I have the appropriate amount of electrical engineers, controls engineers, chemical engineers, physics majors, people who can bring a very different perspective at any problem that we're trying to solve. And we sit together and talk about it, we throw ideas out, and it's an incredible process, I'll tell you, an amazing revelation of how well this works. So then we also look at their cultural background. You know, I want people from all different countries globally. I want people who are old, I want people who are young. I want females, I want males. I mean, any sort of diversity wedge that I can continually build my team around, it really helps in the innovation process. There's been a lot of studies done that diverse, inclusive groups can come up with better ideas than anybody else. You need that alternative viewpoint things. So once we got that in play, during the interview process, we look for people with passion, that entrepreneurial drive to be successful, of course. We look at their interpersonal skills. Every chance you get to do a student presentation or any presentation, do it. People are looking for people who can stand up, be able to talk to people both below them and all the way up to the CEO of the company, and are comfortable doing so. And it takes a long time to get there for most people. So if you get chances to practice your presentation skills, do it. Or the ability to simply have a one-on-one. We always tell people, if you got stuck in the elevator with the CEO of the company, what would you say? That interpersonal skill, to have just a casual conversation, is something you want to develop and be prepared for. And then this inclusive behavior. We want to make sure if we give you a diverse environment, a rich environment, alternative ideas, are you a person who's willing to take them in versus saying, no, I know how to do this. We really don't want that. We want you to search for all the answers. A person told me one time, the best engineer is not the one who knows the answers. It's the one who knows where to go and get the answers and who to go ask. And that's the type of person we're looking for. And why does it work? Why do we want it? We think we get better talent, and we retain talent. People like working in that environment. We're able to use unique skills with the diversity initiative, as long as people have inclusive behaviors and embrace it. The biggest one is it allows us to compete globally. If we're going to have a global company and 60% of Eaton revenue is outside the United States, we need to make sure we have people who understand those regions, understand those cultures, can work in that culture, can talk to those customers, can relate to them, but share those experiences across the globe and recognize when an idea is regional specific or global application. And it leads to much better innovative ideas. There's been all sorts of studies, you can look it up. And it actually, when you look at the posters that you have in this room about engineering skills and opportunities, you can see all that starting to come through. It's absolutely true. All right, closing comments, then we can have an open for conversation. This is me talking again. As you're going through, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, you really want to be thinking all the time, where is my passion? What do I really like doing? Is it automobiles? Is it airplanes? Is it hydropower dams? Is it power electronics? You know, where is your passion? What is the thing that, if you had free time, what would some of the things you'd be doing? Try to make that your career. And then try to visualize what a successful career would look like. What do you want to be doing 5 years in, 10 years in, that would give you the most rewarding career available? And then at the same time, in parallel, plot that against what you want your life to look like 10, 15 years. You want to have a work-life balance. You want to make sure that your work is complementary to what you want your personal life to be. And all of those got to be linked together if you're going to have a successful life and career. One of my first bosses, he was from Oklahoma. He taught me this really early on, and at first I was like, yeah. And then see some of you guys are saying, yeah. But he said, your life, this is no dress rehearsal. You only got one shot at it. And when you're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, you think, oh, come on, that's way out there. It goes by fast. I graduated in 1980, and it seems like yesterday. It really does. Life goes by in a hurry. So make sure what you're planning is really what you want to do, because you only got one shot at it. So take some time, take some notes, have a little diary somewhere. Just talk to yourself about what you hope to do in your career and achieve in life. Keep track of it. Being from Oklahoma, his follow-on comment was that, because it's not a dress rehearsal, is if the horse you're on ain't getting you where you're going, which is his exact words, find a new horse. And it's absolutely true. Don't stay on the same horse if it isn't going to get you where you're going. That was all I had. We got another 5-10 minutes maybe for Q&A. I'll open up. Any questions you guys might have? Yeah.
You said that you were aerospace engineer or aeronautical